Noon. We will now resume meeting number 43, suspended on Tuesday, December the 6th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. The committee was meeting to study the 2022 reports 9 and 10 of the Auditor General of Canada to the Parliament of Canada, referred to the committee on Tuesday, December the 6th. At the moment, the committee was suspended. The committee was debating the motion moved by Mr. Macaulay. Clerk, would you care to clarify the motion?
Yes, apologies. I just want to inform members that the motion that I sent you on Tuesday differs. There are slight differences between the motion that was read on the record, so I would like to know if you want me to send you the motion as read by Mr. Macaulay with the French translation. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have the copy of the motion?
I think that's going to happen. It's going to happen. Do we need to?
Okay, so then, all right, well then, I suggest that we move forward and we resume debate. There were no speakers on the list. Oh, Mr. Fragiscatos.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to amend the motion put forward by Mr. Macaulay as follows. After the word office, add, and I quote now, and that the committee shall also report to the House that attacks made by the Leader of the Official Opposition against the Auditor General in the context of the government's COVID-19 benefit programs are also unacceptable. 2. After the word, quote, unacceptable, add, quote, the committee also requests a government response pursuant to Standing Order 109. And just so we're all on the same page, if amended, the wording of the motion would, the wording of the motion after the amendment would read as follows, that the committee report to the House that it rejects statements made by the Minister of National Revenue in the House of Commons on December 6th regarding the independence of the Auditor General, and that the committee affirms its support for the Auditor General and the independence of the office, and that the committee shall also report to the House that attacks made by the Leader of the Official Opposition against the Auditor General in the context of the government's COVID-19 benefit programs are also unacceptable. The committee also requests a government response pursuant to Standing Order 109.
I see Mr. Desjardins. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In recognition, I believe, of our conversation we had last week and the motion that was tabled by the Conservatives in relation to naming the minister in the House of Commons, I believe that it's incumbent upon us and members of this committee to look at our role here and to ensure that we can continue to have the best practices of this committee and the outcome for Canadians in mind. So I do think that hearing from our discussion last week and now hearing the amendment read by our Liberal colleagues, I think that we can find, at least it's my request, to find a consensus on this, because I think all of us actually do in fact believe in the independence of the Auditor General's office. And I do believe that it's something we can get to. Recognizing that we have this existing amendment on the table, I would invite my Conservative colleagues to maybe look at amending the first portion of the amendment, or of the motion, and read more clearly to the relation of the last point that our friend Mr. Fragiscatos made, the very last portion of his amendment, to just let that portion stand. I think it was B, is what he said, if the Conservatives be willing to amend their original motion.
Perhaps, Mr. Fragiscatos, you could send a copy of your amendment. Oh, sorry.
En français, règlement. Est-ce que c'est possible d'avoir la
Is it possible to have the motion in French, please?
Right, could repeat.
Is it possible to have I'd like to have the motion in French, please.
Okay, please forward a copy both in English and in French of your amendment. Yep. And Mr. Mr. Desjardins, were you suggesting
la motion?
Sorry, the whole thing.
La motion en français, tout simplement.
The motion in French.
I'll read for our colleague, I'll read it in French, and then I have something to say about what Mr. Desjardins has put forward. Je veux modifier la motion.
I would like to modify or amend the motion as follows. After the word office, add that the committee shall also report to the House that the attacks made by the Leader of the Official Opposition against the Auditor General in the context of the COVID-19 benefits by the government are also unacceptable. And two, after the word unacceptable, add the committee also requests a government response pursuant to Standing Order 1092. So, that the committee report to the House that it rejects the statements made by the Minister of National Revenue in the House of Commons on December 6th, undermining Canada's Auditor General, and that the committee affirms its support for the Auditor General and the independence and integrity of the office, and that the committee also report to the House that the comments, attacks made by the Leader of the Official Opposition against the Auditor General pertaining to the COVID-19 benefits are also unacceptable. The committee further requests a government response pursuant to Standing Order 1092.
If I could also add, Madam Chair, if I understood our colleague from the NDP correctly, he mentions the word consensus. I think that we do need consensus as well. I think what he's getting at is that if we put forward something here that doesn't include the Minister of National Revenue, does not include the Leader of the Opposition, and emerge with a motion that, as a committee, has us understand and recognize the importance and independence of the Office of the Auditor General, that would be consensus. I see him nodding his head. So maybe we can proceed to the next step if we want the motion amended so that it reads that way. We can maybe vote. Mr. McCauley, very clever.
Okay, so
That wouldn't be consensus, Kelly.
resuming debate, Mr. Janis.
Yeah, so a couple comments for me. Substantively, the allegation in the amendment moved by Mr. Fragascatos is obviously ridiculous. I don't think that's the point. This committee was responding. I don't think that's the point of what he's doing. Clearly, I mean the committee in its original motion was responding to a comment that had been made by a minister of the Crown the same day that explicitly suggested that the Auditor General was making decisions in response to some kind of political pressure by the opposition. It was an outrageous claim by Minister Leboutillier, and it merited a response, and it merits a response from this committee. I think that's very different from the particulars of the case that he referred to a couple years ago. It's at no point was the integrity or the independence of the Auditor General challenged by the Leader of the Opposition, who in any event was not the Leader of the Opposition at the time when the events took place. So it would have been more sincere maybe if Mr. Fragascatos had felt that the Public Accounts Committee needed to engage in that discussion at the time. But this is clearly a bit rich. That said, if Mr. Desjardins wants a compromise proposal, I'm as capable of doing math as anybody else. So I would certainly welcome Mr. Desjardins' proposal. I think procedurally we'd have to maybe by unanimous consent agree to withdraw this amendment and proceed with Mr. Desjardins' amendment. And I think Mr. Desjardins probably just needs to put his specific compromise language on the floor as as something to talk about, because it's probably easier to discuss actual prospective language than than deal in what possible language could be. Those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Mr. Desjardins, do you have the wording in French and English? And
it'll take me about three minutes,
okay.
unless someone has it in front of them. Didn't you text it to me?
Madam Chair, on a point of order, could I suggest we
okay.
suspend for a few minutes? Would that be helpful?
Please do suspend for a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, so. Motion of Mr. Macaulay.
Sorry, maybe it's some disadvantage to those of us on Zoom, but I haven't heard the new language yet from Mr. Desjardins. So,
All right, please read the new wording.
Thanks so much there, Mr. Genius. And so it's the motion. Well, first of all, I want to clarify something. We last week, at one point, it was advised by the clerk that if we can do things by unanimous consent. And at that time, there was two motions present to us, and we used unanimous consent at that time to amend the original. And so I was going to use the same procedure of unanimous consent to amend the original motion to remove the minister's name and have the amendment read the exact same way, which would be that the committee report to the House, then reject the portion after reject, just everything after that to the word the, and then keep the independence of the Auditor General, and that the committee affirms its support for the Auditor General and the independence of the office, period. So be removing the noun of the minister.
sorry, just could the
Naming
actual-
reference to
would
the minister.
text of the new motion would be read?
Scratch out the portion about the minister.
I don't have the original with me. I just have the one that Peter has.
I've got it.
Can we, yeah, let's suspend the meeting for a few minutes. Oh, we have it right here. Okay, I think we were passed to everybody.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move to amend by unanimous consent the original motion moved by Mr. Macaulay to read that the committee report to the House that the committee affirms its support for the Auditor General and the independence and integrity of the office, and that the committee also request a government response pursuant to Standing Order 109.
Thank you. Do you have it in French?
Oh,
Okay.
Natalie's gonna do that.
Okay, now that I don't need to. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Maybe.
And some words make a difference.
Maybe you should do it.
Okay,
Here.
all right.
Natalie's gonna help me.
Maybe. OK. Donc, en français,
In French, the motion would read as follows. That the committee report to the House that it affirms its support for the Auditor General and the independence of her office. The committee also seeks a response from the government pursuant to Standing Order 109.
We agree.
Do we have unanimous consent? Okay. I see that we have unanimous consent. Excellent. Okay. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Sorry, Madam Chair, just point. Order. I think we have unanimous consent to amend the motion. Now, I think you just need to confirm that we have unanimous consent to adopt the motion, so we don't have that hanging thread. And then, or maybe I just missed something, but I want to make sure we've actually formally adopted the motion, and then we adjourn.
Desjardins?
To adopt the motion as amended.
Do we have unanimous consent? Thank you very much. Is it the, yes?
After this has been adopted, we want to know if there can be a chance for committee business, we haven't had a chance to plan out, there's still outstanding meetings and studies and draft reports.
The chair wants to be here.
Okay, so, all right.
Okay, thank you. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Seeing no further dissent, meeting adjourned.